Hello everyone, welcome to week 5. This is Team 2's presentation for Art 555, History of 20th Century Art, Criticism and Theory. Team 2 consists of Laura Cantrell, Christina Eck, Lee Everett, Annalisa Garcia Ocampo, and Rebecca Gessert. Our presentation focuses on abstraction and Wassily Kandinsky's work concerning the spiritual in art from 1911. Wassily Kandinsky was born on December 4th in 1866 in Moscow, Russia. His family was very well-to-do and he was raised Russian Orthodox. He studied political economy and law and lectured at Moscow University and graduated in these studies in 1892. Despite his educational pursuits, he was fascinated with painting and music, and in his teens was active in creating both art and music. He had strong reactions to colors and natural scenes, which played out in his work throughout his life. In 1895, he saw the work of the Impressionists in Moscow, and especially Monet's Haystacks had a major impact on him and triggered a change in career direction. He is quoted as saying, "I had the impression that here painting itself comes to the foreground. I wondered if it would not be possible to go further in this direction." Kandinsky lived in Russia and Europe for 78 years. During his lifetime, some of the most tumultuous changes humanity has faced took place, including 2 world wars and the Russian Revolution. You can see how his style changes and in a sense parallels and reflects the times he lived in. Early in his life, he was influenced by the Impressionists, which you can see in his own work, The Blue Rider from 1903. With his founding of the Blue Rider group with Franz Marc in 1911 in Germany, he begins exploring abstract color and form and continues to do so when he returns to Russia post-revolution to head up the new government's Academy of Arts. Disillusioned with the direction Russia is headed, he goes to Germany and becomes an influential member of the Bauhaus in the 1920s and 30s. Unfortunately, due to the rise of Nazism, which ended the Bauhaus, he moves to Paris, where he would live out his life during the Second World War, but still prolifically pushed the boundaries of abstraction through color and form up until his death in Paris in December of 1944. Kandinsky wrote in the introduction to Concerning the Spiritual in Art that every work of art is the child of its age and in many cases the mother of our emotions. Essentially, he is lamenting that in his present time, society is too materialistic and lacks soul. The art that is being created is for art's sake alone and not for a deeper spiritual purpose. It doesn't move art or society forward to the future, but it is just rehashing the past. He does, though, see a spiritual beacon in the work of the primitives, which is a broad term for art that is both ancient and indigenous, but also work of European artists who are influenced by these ancient and indigenous cultures. Paul Gauguin and Pablo Picasso are likely the primitives that he is referencing here, who are providing a spark of inner life and whose work of art provides Stimmung. Stimmung is a German word that is difficult to translate, but is similar to the sublime in that it's about art that provides a thrill of emotion to the observer and shows the essential spirit of nature. One of Kandinsky's major contributions to the theory of art is the simile of the triangle, which represents the life of the spirit. This triangle is moving slowly forward and also upward in time and space. The triangle itself is made up of artists. Who and what is at the apex of the triangle is in the now. The lower levels of the triangle will move into the future, and the cycle will continue onward, forward, and upward. Kandinsky gave Beethoven as an example of an artist who was at the apex of the triangle during his time. Vincent van Gogh can be thought of as an example of a painter who was not understood by most during his time and was seen as a madman by many, but who now is revered for his genius in moving art forward and following an inner spiritual truth. The risk for any artist at the apex is that the isolation they feel or even the success that they may have may drive them lower down the triangle where they are falsely nourished by materialistic gain and regress as artists. The movement of the triangle is something we can see in society today. A good example of this outside of the artistic world would be someone like Steve Jobs from Apple, who actually brought a sense of Stimmung to computing. He made what was cold and technological, personal, inviting, and necessary. Many people considered him a madman as much as a genius, but we can see how society has moved towards his vision.
What is spiritual revolution? Spiritual revolution is an exploration of the deepest and most authentic motives for making art, the internal necessity that impels artists to create as a spiritual impulse and audiences to admire art as a spiritual hunger. Literature, music, and art are the most sensitive spheres in which you can feel the spiritual revolution. Kandinsky references Matterlink, and he talks about how he takes us into a supernatural world of lost souls. Debussy creates a spiritual impression in a musical form. Music transforms your senses and takes you to another dimension. You are elevated and uplifted, or you are either saddened. Here we have an example of what I think he was trying to say. We have Victor and Heinrich Dunwich, the crucifixion. In this painting, you clearly see the spiritual aspect of what Kandinsky is talking about. You see the crucifixion, and you see the two men on the side also being crucified. You see the people weeping. You see Mary Magdalene. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of chaos going on. There's a lot of catastrophe in this painting. And I think in this painting, we can get a clear sense of what was considered a spiritual revolution during this time. He talks about Schomburg, and he realizes that the greatest freedom of art cannot be absolute. Every age achieves a new measure of freedom, and every generation surpasses each other and advances. At the end of the chapter, Kandinsky talks about two Impressionist artists, Picasso and Matisse. Picasso represents form, and Matisse represents color. Here we have two examples that I selected. We have Weeping Women, and we have the Desert Harmony in red. In the Picasso painting, we see a different kind of spiritual revolution. We see an artist creating a personal piece. We see a woman that is weeping. We feel the pain of this woman, and the colors and the shapes, the hard edges, everything about this painting invites you. Everything about this painting makes you want to look and find out more about it. In the Desert Harmony in red, Matisse is not worried about perspective. He's not worried about showing you different angles of the room. The tablecloth and the wallpaper are one. You don't see where one starts and one ends. You just see color, you see line, you see emotion, you see gesture. And I think that this was a new generation that was discovering a new form of art and of a new form of spiritual revolution.
The pyramid. All roads lead to abstract. Kandinsky recognizes in this chapter how artists are making their own unique statements with their own language, such as music or painting. And each of these arts is striving towards the abstract, the non-material, obeying Socrates' know thyself. The natural result of this striving is that the arts are drawing together. Their common teacher is music. Musicians have led the way as they do not reproduce natural phenomena, but rather their work is a true expression of the artist's soul. By the end of this short chapter, Kandinsky starts referring to painting as she, and argues that painting needs to stop striving to recreate nature and start expressing the souls of artists. As all art forms start striving toward these mutual goals of expression, then the pyramid of spirituality will someday reach heaven. In this chapter, Kandinsky outlines how a viewer processes color, as well as the short and long-term psychological effects of color. The process begins with the purely physical impression of color, where the eye is either warmed or cooled. A short-lasting sensation that leaves no lasting impression and leaves the soul unaffected. This superficial impression of color can spark a chain reaction of related sensations. The impression of colors vary by experience and sensitivity. For instance, first-time experiences are similar to the wonderment of a child experiencing something for the first time, leaving an immediate impression on the soul. Think about the first time you played with Play-Doh. For me, it was a multifaceted experience, mostly filled with joy as I explored all of Play-Doh's potential. I figured out how to not just make pleasing shapes, but also to twirl colors together and make objects that could be used in my imaginary worlds. There is, of course, the painful experience of stepping on crumbles of dried Play-Doh or perhaps finding out that Play-Doh doesn't flush. You know, kids. All parts of this primary experience were immediately impressive on my soul. However, I grew up and naturally grew less interested in the simple pleasures of Play-Doh. In a way, the world grew disenchanted for me, as Kandinsky puts it. But as one grows up, the circle of these experiences grow wider, and they acquire new meaning. For instance, now when my son and I sculpt with Play-Doh together, I have a nostalgic feeling, and I am aware of the sweet impressions this experience will leave on my son's memory. Perhaps like me, when he smells Play-Doh as an adult, he will have that same warm feeling of nostalgia. Kandinsky asserts that colors can likewise have a psychic effect, the second main result of looking at colors that steps towards the spiritual vibration of the soul. The psychic effect of color may be direct or the outcome of association, but in either case, colors have the power to awaken our senses. Kandinsky references a doctor who had an unusual patient who claimed to taste blue in a certain sauce, which is challenging to understand. However, many more people could agree on vibrant yellow sounding like a shrill trumpet, or blue, the sound of a cello. Kandinsky's exploration of color is only the tip of the iceberg. In 1963, Joseph Albers published Interaction of Color, a thorough study of the science and psychology of color. His series of over 1,000 coincidental paintings, Homage to the Square, explore the perception of color. Kandinsky also notes the physiological effects that colors have on the body, which have been explored in chromotherapy. For instance, red light stimulates and excites the heart, while blue light can cause temporary paralysis. Color psychology has become not just an important subject for artists, but it has also been thoroughly studied for product branding and marketing. Pause here to learn more about your favorite colors and what effects they may have on your body and mind. True to his belief that artists have much to learn from musicians, Kandinsky equates artists to the hand striking the keys of a piano, playing colors like a melody that vibrates the spirit.